Hello, everyone. Hi, everyone. I am letting in Dr. Subica to join us on this conversation today. Hello.
Aloha. Hello,
Aloha.
party
I love it.
peoples.
Oh,
What's
this
up?
is so great. It worked out so purely. I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Subica, for joining us today for our mental health conversation. Last month was the Black, Indigenous, People of Color Mental Health Month, and we Provoc together with Facebook and other alliances came together to do a lot of awareness around what it means to be in touch with our mental well-being. How do we move away from the cultural norms or the traditional norms that have been, or the Western traditional norms that have been kind of impacting us, and how we kind of stand in solidarity with each other. So it's been really awesome to be in this space. So I will stop talking and give you some moment to let us know who you are, and a little bit of background of what you do and what got you to this point of working in a mental health space.
Okay. Well, thank you. So my name is Andy. I am an associate professor at the UC Riverside School of Medicine. I basically specialize in mental health and physical health, but what we refer to as disparities. So those are health differences between different groups, such as African Americans or Asian Americans or Pacific Islanders. But there have to be grounded in what we call social or some type of economic disadvantage. So it's not just health differences for health differences' sake. There are a lot of groups that have differences in cancer or depression, but this has to be caused by things like racism, discrimination, low income, lack of resources. And so that's really the space I occupy, our mental and physical health disparities. And I was trained as a clinical psychologist in Hawaii. So,
Oh,
you
wow.
know, we call the mainland. Mainland's a little bit different with the race relations and the disparities. So it's always pretty exciting to learn,
Oh, wow.
and talk to people
Yeah.
through things like this. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's so great. Um, and are you currently in Hawaii or?
I wish I was. I
Oh,
was last
see,
month
I'm so
for a couple
jealous.
months. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Now, see, you made me sad.
Oh no,
No,
don't
I
be
live in
sad.
Southern California though, so it's
Oh,
pretty
that's
nice.
nice.
Though it's 100 degrees, I think today it's gonna be 100
Whew.
degrees. So,
Oh,
so
that's
I'm not built for that.
yeah,
Hawaii, it's like a high of 85 out
yeah,
of
yeah.
yeah.
No, I feel you. I totally feel you. To get into our questions, our first check-in question is, I am feeling dash today because of blank. So what are you feeling today? And what are some of the causes of that feeling that you're feeling?
Ooh. Well, I guess I'll cheat. I'll do two things. I'm excited
Okay.
and I'm nervous.
Oh,
We chatted earlier a little bit. I'm not that nervous, but I just don't like talking about myself that much.
yeah,
It may be a cultural thing.
yeah,
Uh, I assume it actually is a cultural thing
yeah,
where, we had chatted about that very briefly.
yeah,
You don't want to elevate your profile too much. You don't want to seem like you're looking for attention or things like that. That's just how it's ingrained in
yeah.
me. So
That's
things like this, I mean, they're important so I can reach people, and that's probably why, I'm excited. So I'll say maybe 80% excited, 20%, oh man, I have to talk about myself. This is
oh, but we appreciate you for minimizing the 20% to 20%, your nervousness to 20%.
yeah.
And I will make sure to do my best to navigate this space with you. I know
Yeah.
it is uncomfortable. I also experienced that through cultural,
Yeah.
learnings and things that I'm actually unlearning as well. So I appreciate you showing up in this space. It's really powerful.
Yeah.
Um, And so, well, I know BIPOC Mental Health Month has passed now, or it's just been a couple of days since it's wrapped up, but it's still something that we continue to experience, right? It's not just a month and then it goes away, poof, and we are okay human beings functioning in this world, right? So, what does it mean to you? What did this month mean to you, and how do you continue to, celebrate or make sure that it's a priority for you?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's meaningful. Well, flat out, it's overdue,
Yeah,
right? It's absolutely overdue.
so true.
I do love that it's BIPOC, right? The
Yeah,
Black, Indigenous, and people of color, because it's centering the fact that, there are a lot of, even in people of color, language, and dialogue, there are groups that we don't necessarily talk about enough or pay enough attention to. And that's what I really have been excited about this year. It's been a sad, sad year, but it has been exciting because I feel like broader society has a new awareness of just the deep impact on immigrant, on indigenous, on colonized peoples in the US, of just how much their mental health has been impacted, and not just because of the pandemic, but right every day BIPOC, BIPOCs experience discrimination, hate, prejudice, racism is now becoming bigger, but we don't talk about things like cultural trauma,
yeah,
which are continuing to be perpetuated, and just we see generation over generation just suffering from a mental health perspective
right,
because we don't have enough of these dialogues,
right.
this understanding.
Yeah.
So that part, I would say, is what really excites me about this month, is calling attention to the experiences, but also the suffering that we are experiencing just on a daily basis and for hundreds of years.
Right.
And then the fact that just for all people of color, it's a shared experience of this. I think the pandemic showed, especially for Asian Americans, Pacific Islanders, to some degree, there was so little awareness even in those communities of just how deep the prejudice and discrimination was. And now there are thousands and thousands of documented cases, which show that we're all kind of in this together. None of us as communities are escaping
Mm-hmm.
the fact that we are not healthy
Yeah.
because of all the structures around us. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I like that, and I hope that it brings awareness. My true hope is that, people of color who are experiencing mental health issues will feel like it's more normal if we continue to have months like these,
Right.
and then continue dialogues
Right.
afterwards. And that's really, I think, critical
Yeah.
to make sure we avoid things like suicide or serious depression or just health issues.
Yeah, exactly. That's so true. I love that you tied in, it's not about only the last month that we experienced or the last year that we experienced, all the traumatic things that have happened to us culturally or traditionally, just racism, systemic things that have happened in the past hundreds and hundreds of years. It's just compounded, and it's time to really recognize how we need to be really aware of those and continuing to make sure that we heal and really address those things. Yeah, that's really important. I appreciate you for sharing that. So the next question that I have for you, sorry, I'm like trying to make sure I have my questions all lined up really clearly, and kind of going into the healing modalities. What are some healing modalities that you've put in place for yourself as you're navigating the last year and even the last month, and how do you continue to practice those in your daily life?
I like that question because it's really made me reflect on things myself. So I'm a clinical psychologist. I've been trained. I treat people with depression, anxiety, serious mental illness for years. And yet the pandemic has taught me, I'm neglecting myself when it comes to these healing modalities. And it's just so easy, I think, to not be self-reflective about these types of things. So the biggest thing I did was probably, oh, cool, there are comments. Sorry.
Oh, that's awesome.
I didn't even realize there are comments. Okay.
Yeah, they are comments.
Yeah. All right, well, so I'll let you handle that. But
yeah, absolutely.
So the main thing that I think I've done is I've taught this for a while, and I've always practiced it, is mindfulness. But I don't think I applied it in the way, like as frequently as I should have. Until the pandemic. And I'll be honest, I think the pandemic forced me to, both mentally and physically. Mindfulness raises a lot of kind of, different ideas for people. But really what I think of with mindfulness is just trying to be mindful of myself,
Right.
my own mental health needs probably for the first time in my life. And then even just the environment around me.
Right.
And then, of course, it's living in the present moment, not worrying about the future, not dwelling on the past, so that you can be more functional. But the way I practice it, for instance, is I've realized I have to take a break every so often, pause while I'm working, I'm doing, calls or something, even Zoom. You can get this. My brain at times has felt broken during this
Ooh,
pandemic.
yeah.
I have to be honest.
Ooh, say that
Yeah,
again.
it's just my eyes start hurting. I
Yeah.
can't concentrate. Usually I push through that, and then I had to learn that hey, it's okay to pause, even for 30 seconds,
Right.
to just close my eyes, take 3 or 4 deep breaths,
Yeah.
and then just do that a couple times during the day.
Yeah.
Sometimes I can do it for 2 or 3 minutes. Sometimes there's just no time,
Mm-hmm.
but something like that has helped. And then the other thing is, I think it's hilarious, is I walk all the time.
Oh, I love that.
I did. I always played sports, so I never really thought about walking and hiking. I said, oh, that's so boring, or things like that. And now I do it every day. I try and take as many meetings as I can while walking, because I just realize nature is important to me.
Oh,
I think growing up in Hawaii, living in LA, these urban environments, I didn't realize how important trees were. I didn't realize how important seeing the mountains where I live in suburban kind of California.
Right, right.
Yeah, if I don't get a daily dose of that, I don't do well.
Yeah.
So this is a real learning
beautiful.
experience
Yeah.
for me
Yeah.
to do just all of these type of things I would never have thought I had the time to do before.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And it's so fascinating as a clinical psychologist, been trained to manage all of those stressors for others, showing up the way you have probably for so many people, having that time to reflect. I'm sure that was like a really unique experience for yourself as well, to be able to apply some of the things that are clinically there, but then also like, what are some of the things that I can apply for my own well-being, from whether it be culturally or kind of looking back to some things that you've done in the past, or not even, or even like friends or family that have done it before, and you're like, these are the things that work, So I appreciate that you're being really mindful about that for yourself as well. That's powerful. And walking meetings, gonna try that. Yeah, I do that a lot as well. That's really awesome. And there's a question before. Dr. Tran asked this: are there similarities and differences among Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders? And I'm assuming in the way that we cope with mental health and just in that space. I believe that's the specific question there.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of similarities, and then there are key differences, right? I don't want this to be too kind of researchy or anything like that, because my research does focus on Asian American Pacific Islander mental health separately.
Okay.
But one of the things I think when I do talk to both Asian American Pacific Islander communities that I really like to talk about, and that we don't talk about enough in, I would say, U.S. society or Western culture, or I'm at a med school, so Western medicine, is the importance of mind and body connection. We just don't talk about how essential that is.
Yeah.
And it's because I feel like we don't have a great understanding in, the U.S. about that. We treat mental health and physical health super differently, right? Psychologists, people are scared to see them, right? But people go to your doctor. Yeah. You go to your doctor for a wellness checkup. Do they ask you if you're suicidal or drinking alcohol? Never. They're two very different things. And that's so artificial. And I think it leads to a lot of issues. Right. Whereas Asian American Pacific Islander, a lot of non-Western cultures, even Latinx, they understand that there's a mind-body spirit, right? What's healthy for the mind is healthy for the body. Yeah. And if one is not doing good, the other's not doing good. So I always focus on that with both communities. I love that. And then there's actually a third element I really like, which is almost tabooed to talk about in like U.S. healthcare, which is mind, body, and spirit. And the importance of spirit and spirituality just being weaved into really, this sense of health that we need. Right. So that's, I would say, just a big similarity. Right. Is that we all respond to things, like if our spiritual self is not doing well, I think, mental health is not going to be as good as it can.
Right.
physical health might suffer a little bit. Yeah, through things like not enough sleeping or poor diet.
Yeah.
There's just so many ways it can manifest.
That's so true.
Yeah.
That's so true. I appreciate that so much. I feel like I recently came into the understanding of what spiritual connection means to my mental well-being as well. It was a very huge taboo for us, especially coming from an Ethiopian background. Being an immigrant, it's not something that's really practiced. And so I love that. I love that connection that I finally have, and it's been so anchoring and grounding for me. And I love that you mentioned all three. And we
Yeah.
we get to do some of the mind and some of the body, like you said, and Western ideologies really focus on the physical being and not necessarily
Yes.
just about how everything else is connected.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that connectedness of like there are so many different elements and we all have to be aligned in that way. Yeah.
It is. And the one, I guess, thing I would add on to that is when spirit, there's so many definitions of spirituality.
Right.
And a lot of people get concerned, especially in healthcare or academia or something, right? If you're teaching students, that spirituality means religion.
Yeah.
And religious beliefs. And it doesn't necessarily mean that. It can include it if a person, if that's the way that they find spirituality, that's what centers them, that's their belief.
Right.
But, it's really, the definition I like is just a connection, a sense of meaning and purpose, like building connections with yourself.
I love that.
Or with others,
Yeah.
or with nature,
Yeah.
or a higher power.
Right.
Yeah. So, and that's what I try and practice nowadays is just being more connected to the trees around me while I'm walking, actually paying attention to them.
Right.
I would never have paid attention to trees or flowers before. I was just,
Yeah.
not in I grew up in Hawaii. We have trees and flowers everywhere, but now I appreciate them during the pandemic so much more.
I love
and that's spiritual healing for me.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I apologize for the background noise. There's, life at home, working
As
from
pandemic
home.
life. Yeah.
This is part of the pandemic, working from home style.
Yeah.
But yeah, I appreciate that comment about that as well. I really do. That's really powerful. And the next question, we have about 10 more minutes, and so we'll kind of dive into other questions. You kind of alluded to this already, about with the connection of mind, body, and spirit. What are some ways that you have responded to emotional triggers that could be useful for you, that have been useful for you and could be useful for others to also practice and do?
Yeah. Well, I talked about the mindfulness. I talked about walking, which has been a little bit of I love playing team sports. I grew up playing soccer, basketball. I still played soccer probably 3 times a week before the pandemic. And then, of course, I would find doors. And you can't do that with social distancing, right? So for the past year and almost a half now, that's just been off the table. So, finding what energizes you when you're emotionally triggered, when you're, because we often think about how much we need to take a break. And I'm going to emphasize that probably in our, the rest of our call, how much you need to pause, take a break, center yourself.
Yeah.
But a lot of times we also need to be energized during this pandemic because we're all fatigued. I think we're all just so tired of everything. Right? Waking up is hard for some people. There's some days, it's just, it's like, wow, this is not easy. And so finding what energizes you is really important. And that's different for everyone. Right. For me, outside of walking, it's socializing. And unfortunately, that's phone calls. I probably call people on the phone more than I ever have, except probably when I'm going through a breakup. That's probably the only other time I really call people. When you're younger. You're always reaching out for emotional support. But now I think it just taught me that even if things aren't bad, you still should be connecting with people some more. And Zoom calls are great, but I like phone calls now. The Zoom brain is a unique thing. The studies are showing it's not the healthiest thing for us.
Right. Yeah, that totally makes sense. I love that you mentioned how like finding things that energizes you, and something that I've actually put in practice is listening to music. Music has always been my outlet, but like just like being able to take a moment to really listen to music, and it's all different vibrations, right? From hip hop to
Yeah.
whatever it is that I would love to connect with. That's been so powerful to me to be able to like, oh, okay, there's creativity around me and there's beautiful music that's around me. I can actually,
Yeah.
listen and get energized by that. So yeah, that's a really great reminder. I appreciate you sending that, sharing that as well.
Can I just say I
Yeah,
love that? That is, I didn't even think about that. Is probably, yeah, maybe my
yeah,
second thing. Yeah, music is life,
yeah,
right?
it
And you
is.
don't realize it
Yeah,
until you're in a situation where it really is your lifeline.
yeah, yeah,
Maybe,
yeah,
right? It's funny when you're teenagers, you're struggling through something and you're depressed or right, you can listen to music and it makes you feel listened to, right?
right.
Back in my day it was they called it emo music or things like that,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? You want to rock out, but then there's, right, if you there's love,
Yeah,
romantic music, there's just so much stuff. Yeah, I
yeah,
like
that
it.
can be transit. Yeah,
That's incredibly energizing. Yeah,
yeah, it
it's a really
really
healthy,
is. And a
really
very
healthy way
healthy
that
one too.
you would cope.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's so it's interesting because I don't know if I'm sure there are specific music styles that come from your cultural background as well. At least for me, there are certain drums or certain beats that kind of bring me back to the ground, like they anchor me a little bit more.
Yeah,
I've noticed that and that connection to the spirit, right? Like that being able to listen to something and be like, oh, that was what my ancestors played,
yeah,
to like get them energized and happy or dancing or whatever the case may be. And so like even to that extent, like I take it that far.
yeah.
And it's really been like it's such a beautiful healing energy for
Mhm.
me. So yeah, that was really what
So
came up for
happy.
me. Yeah,
That is
yeah,
so cool. Yeah,
yeah,
I
yeah,
love that
that's
for you.
awesome. Thank you. Yeah, that's awesome. Last question before we get into Q&A with folks.
Cool.
Um, oh yeah, raises the human vibration. Yes, that's so true. It
Yeah.
does. It really does. And thank you, friend, for joining. That's one of my good friends who's listening in. Um, how do you recommend that people start a conversation with family and friends about mental well-being, especially if it's a taboo, if it's not
Yeah.
practiced? Yeah.
You use the right word, taboo.
Yeah.
Right? There's so much shame and stigma involved,
Mm,
and I see it with Asian American, Pacific Islander communities, but really everyone.
mm,
No one feels like they're winning when they're
mm.
really struggling with their mental health.
No, yeah.
Right?
Oh my God.
It tells
So
you things
true.
like you're failing, you're not good enough. These are all the messages we're told by our own brain and society
Yeah.
that keep us from seeking mental health. Uh, so the number one thing I always tell people is ask about it if you're talking about family and friends, because people are so unlikely to see someone like me
Mm,
or people with the AAPA organization. It's just we're almost the last line,
right.
and oftentimes we're the people that someone struggling will turn to when they're in crisis already, right? Or they're forced to see it. So people are getting mental health, what they need from friends, from family, from pastors, what we call lay individuals or lay providers. And so each one of us can be a resource for the people we care about.
Right.
And that really is asking about it. And I'll say, ask if you think someone's struggling, which can be real hard when we don't see each other that much during the pandemic.
Mm,
But just as importantly, I always think is even when people aren't, like if you make it a routine to check in with people about how they're doing emotionally, which is kind of an odd thing, some people might think it's weird, you want to just make it common, because the more you do that, the more you strike people as authentic
right.
and genuine. So when
Yeah.
they are struggling, they'll be more likely to confide in you because you built that trust. It's not
Yeah.
just oh, you're doing great, oh, you're doing bad, how are you doing right now? They're gonna be like, oh, I'm fine, don't worry about me.
Yeah.
Whereas if you've established that relationship,
Yeah. Yeah.
then it's really good. The other thing I say is don't be scared to follow up.
Mm,
So many times
hmm.
maybe we're brave enough to ask someone, whether it's a parent or something, one time, and they
Right.
know it's uncomfortable, you have a good conversation, and then you never want to talk about it again.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or
No,
really,
yeah.
but,
So true.
but again, you want to establish this as just this is part of our relationship because that's a healthy relationship. And then I'm a psychologist, so I do talk about what's called modeling. If you can model for the people around you, kind of emotional, like healthy communication about emotions, whether it's anger, sadness, or happiness.
Yeah.
You know, that's really important. We underestimate how much other people's behaviors influence us.
Ooh.
But it really, so even
So
for
true.
vaccines, right, there's some hesitancy.
Right.
You know, professionals aren't going to do it. It's your, what we call reference group, your peer group, your parents, your family,
So
your
true.
church, who we look
Yeah.
to model getting vaccines
Yeah.
type of thing.
Exactly.
And that's the same
Right.
thing for mental health is, right, venting is not the same. So, you know,
Right.
talking to your partner, venting about work, or that's not exactly what we're talking about modeling.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
do it good for your
Yes.
mental health.
Right. Right.
But you then want to be able to maybe label the emotion, right? Oh man, I'm so annoyed, you know, and that's made me very frustrated. And I'm
Right.
feeling down about that now.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that's a really healthy way to kind of engage. And if you can just add in, you know, what you're, how you're coping with it. Then you've kind of modeled the whole spectrum of just how do we be emotionally more healthy and look out for ourselves.
Right. Yeah, that's really powerful. Oh, I love that. I love that modeling aspect because we and sometimes I don't know if you experience this in your own personal life, but with my family at least, sometimes it becomes a different generational gap between how we even converse about our emotional space or even coping. It's not really aligned, right? Like the way that we even talk about it. But once I, start talking about it the way I do and express it so freely, honestly, the way it's received is also even different, right? And it seeps in a little bit more. And it's like, oh, okay, well, she is feeling like this because of this, and this is how she's dealing with it. I can do that too, or so I totally love that strategy or even way of working through it with family and friends. Yeah, that's powerful.
And I'll say it's not normal. You know, it takes practice. It just takes
does.
practice and repetition. It's just we're not conditioned to do that. I would say, to be vulnerable.
That's so true. That's so true. Thank you so much for sharing that, gem. That was really powerful. We have one question. What are your thoughts? Okay, let me pin it here so you can see it.
Ooh, okay. I see the EMDR versus brains, but I can't see the rest.
Oh, so what are
Can
your?
you just read it for me?
Yeah, absolutely. What are your thoughts on EMDR versus brain spotting in terms of trauma, and do you use these modalities?
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Okay. So trauma is a tricky thing, right? Especially if we're talking about individual trauma, like trauma and post-traumatic stress disorder. EMDR, I mean, there are different modalities. You definitely nailed it. There is some evidence for EMDR, which is interesting that it is because it's a very unique, it's a unique way of practicing. For me personally, though, I am trained as what's called cognitive behavioral therapist. So I primarily, especially I worked in the VA for a while, especially with veterans from Afghanistan, Iraq, and Vietnam War. And they really emphasize more cognitive behavioral treatments like prolonged exposure therapy, cognitive processing therapy, which is just a different way of conceptualizing what trauma's kind of negative consequences are on the brain and on the way we think. Whereas EMDR, brain spotting, I'm actually not that familiar with it. So I'm now going to get off and look at it. So you taught me something about brain spotting. But, trauma, I guess I have to say trauma is a tricky thing. And
There you go. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
But honestly, going into treatment in general is better than no treatment, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I have to land on that part.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for that. We have one more question.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, Dr. Chan, what can providers do to more specially serve the Asian American and NHPI community?
Okay, I guess since we're running out of time, I'll do two quick answers.
Yeah, absolutely. Take your time.
The first one is just trying to understand the cultures themselves. If you're not an Asian American and Pacific Islander provider, you can still provide services to Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. In fact, in my work with Pacific Islander communities, when I ask them who would they want to get treatment from, they actually say someone like me who's not from their specific community. So if they're Samoan community, not Samoan, because there's for them there's a long history of, right, oh, this person might be from our village, they might, it might not be confidential. So there's actually some comfort level for, seeking and benefiting from non-Asian American Pacific Islander providers. But then the responsibility is on the providers and on the service system, the hospital, the mental health program, to make sure that the people serving these communities are aware of the communities, know something about the communities, and understand something about what the cultural lens and their beliefs are in going in, because they do deeply affect how they're going to engage in therapy. And then if Asian American Pacific Islanders are going to stay in therapy, getting people linked with services is the first step. But Asian American Pacific Islanders drop out of therapy, and Latinx and African American and American Indian, right? All are not going to stay in therapy if they don't feel like they build a connection with their providers.
Right.
The second thing I guess I'm going to say is just a plug. We just need more Asian American Pacific Islander providers. We need more people from the community. We need to train more. We need to have more programs. We need to center high school students even making it to college, because we lose so much talent from Asian American, Southeast Asian, Pacific Islander communities, if we're just talking about these communities specifically, who are just fantastic if you give them opportunity.
Yeah.
And until we build like this cohort of just BIPOCs who are dedicated to the community, learn the mental health from the Western perspective, and then just make these radical changes to serve their communities, how are we really going to affect change on a community level?
Right. Oh,
yeah.
That's powerful.
And so we just need to be doing a better job of focusing our resources there, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's powerful. Yeah, thank you. Yes, that deserved a clap for sure. That's really powerful. And last, a last question or wrapping up comment is that there are resources like AAPA, right? For folks to get connected to make sure that we are highlighting this work and continuing to also recruit more folks from the community to be able to do this work with us. And so I appreciate that you mentioned what that looks like, and there are resources here for us, right? AAPA is one amazing organization, and so I'm so glad to be able, in partnership with them, to be able to do this work as well. And if is there anything that you would like to leave us with? How can we check you out? Do you have a website or any way we can connect with you?
Yeah, I mean, I would be super responsive to emails, right? My last name is Subica @gmail.com. Write to me, reach out to AAPA. They are phenomenal. They have so many people who are way cooler than I am and way better than I am, who can serve everyone.
You're amazing. You're amazing. I'm giving you that back.
Yeah, and I think I have a Twitter page. Hit me up on that. Yeah, Andy Subica.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
And
but
if
really,
you
AAPA is dope. So,
I was going to just say, AAPA has been amazing, and will continue to be amazing, and they're a great resource. Yes, and thank you so much, Dr. Subica, for your time and your honest and just open self to come into the space and talk about all the things that you have shared with us. It was really powerful. And thank you everyone for watching, and we'll see you on another live very shortly, probably in the next couple of days. We'll be back with another community alliance that we're working with. So talk to you then. Alrighty. Bye everyone. Thank you. Take care.